Welcome to week 4 here at MPAI 760 here at Georgetown University's Applied Intelligence Program. Uh, just want to start off with a couple of announcements. I want to do office hours um, this Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I just want to ask if there's interest in it. If there's enough interest in it, I'll go ahead and have them, and we can do it over Zoom. But when you acknowledge that you've watched this video, please say if you're interested in the office hours, and if you want to push it. I know maybe 8 p.m. might be a little bit early for people on the East Coast or on the West Coast. So if we want to push it to 9 o'clock or push it however you want, we can go ahead and do that. But I do want to have an office hours, and we can talk about the class. We can talk about the upcoming paper, talk about future career prospects. I know a couple of you had questions on that as well. So yeah, I want to try and do that so we can get an online, in-person part of this course. So let me know if that's good. Let me know if that's the right time. Writing style. I had a couple questions about this, and we can go in more detail at the office hours. But what I'm looking for, and people have asked about intelligence writing style and what the IC looks for. One, I would say the issue that some people had with their papers, and not everyone, is just a little bit of clutter in the paper. And what I mean by, the best way to look at this is try and have every word, every sentence earn its way onto your paper. If it's a 500-page or word writing assignment, you should be going to 1,000 words and trying to cut out what's the extraneous stuff. And I always like to have topical sentences. And what I mean by that is, I write my essays. First, I write out topical sentences, and then every sentence afterward tries to reinforce whatever that first sentence in the paragraph, which reinforces my thesis. That is how your writing can be better. And to face it, writing is based on strength of argument. That's the best way to put it. So you want to have a strong argument, and you want to use evidence to back up your overall thesis. That's probably the best way to improve your writing, or what I'm looking for in the midterms and as well as the papers as well. So just keep that in mind as you go ahead and use the Writing Center. Use them. You'll get tips from them that you would not normally get if you were just trying to proofread it yourself. So try and get your essays done a couple of days ahead of time and use the Writing Center, and they can give you feedback as well. So again, if there's questions on the writing, please let me know. So review of Cbrn Terrorism, likelihood of a WMD attack. I think everyone thought that it was a lot more likely than I might have said earlier last week. I just want to caution you is that, there's an old joke that there's going to be a WMD attack in the United States in the next 5 years, and then 5 years goes by, and then it comes the next 5 years after that, next 5 years after that. We still have not had a mass WMD attack. So again, I still go on the likelihood of a WMD attack, at least a mass casualty one, that kills over 100 people, is very, very low. And the question comes up is, okay, if it's a 2% chance that's going to happen, is it worth spending billions of dollars and inconvenience people to make that 2% go down to a 0.5% chance? Is it worth it? Again, when you talk about the catastrophic consequences, that to make a WMD attack, the chances go even smaller. And the one thing I would probably, when I sign this next year, it would be, okay, everyone said it's likelihood, and all of you gave evidence for that, but I would also say is it worth spending billions of dollars to stop it? Is it worth having checkpoints on every bridge and every tunnel to stop it? Worth it? I think a lot of you would probably say the likelihood or the risk would not be that enthralling or not important. I'll let you decide. But again, I think everyone said it was likelihood. I'm not going to take points off of it. but I would not agree with that assessment to begin with. And then Cbrn Vectors, the one thing I just want to, I think most people said chemical was Cbrn. ISIS has demonstrated chemical weapons capability. Obviously, there's chemical weapons. Syrian regime has. And it's important to note that Shinrikyo had that capability or had that decision point, whether it was chemical or biological, and they chose chemical. Easier to manufacture, easier to scale up, and then you get that immediate effect if you're trying to draw attention to what you're trying to do. Biological weapons tend to cause, it might take days, weeks, even months for it to manifest itself, and you don't get that immediate effect that you get from one large-scale chemical attack. Just on a side note, I was watching Netflix and the Rajneeshis. There is a mini-series on the Rajneeshis who really did the first large-scale salmonella or biological attack with salmonella in Washington State. And it's called Wild Wild Country. Great documentary overall, but that highlights the only, before the anthrax attack, large-scale biological attack where hundreds of people were sickened. And they did not do it necessarily as an act of terrorism, although it was terrorism, but they did it to decrease voter turnout in an election that they were trying to win. So, interesting other vectors. Another vector that people brought up was dirty bombs, and that brings me up to my next point. Dirty bombs, particularly the commercially available radiological material, tends to be a weapon of disruption. It's scary. When you hear radiation all over New York City or Washington, D.C., it's going to scare people. It's going to alter people's patterns of life, but it's not going to kill a whole lot of people at once. And that's the whole point of a dirty bomb. That's a primarily focus for a dirty bomb. And the question is, should that be a weapon of mass destruction? I would call it a weapon of mass disruption. So good comments for week 3. Thank you for your participation. Moving on to week 4. I'm going to send out another article. I'll send it when I send out the announcements here. The theme for this week is on Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And basically the delta, the contrasting between Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They're contrasting tactics, recruitment, objectives, and goals. That's a key theme going on for this week, and how well we've tried to counter Al-Qaeda and ISIS as well through the Clinton administration, Bush, Obama, and now Trump. So that'll be a theme. And then one of your paper this week is going to be immigrant issues. With everything that's going on the border, I don't want to conflate. I don't want this to sound discriminatory or anything. And this is actually not really geared towards the United States. It's more geared towards the European Union. The question is, is there a threat from immigration or immigrants, first generation, second generation, third generation immigrants coming into places like Europe mainly? There really isn't a terrorism threat from people coming across the southern border, despite what you might hear in the news. But in Europe, particularly talking about Germany, which has let 1 million refugees in, France, which has let hundreds of thousands of refugees in, France and Belgium, which had large migrant populations as well as colonial populations when they had Algeria and North Africa under their domain. That's where the genesis of the question comes. And for those of you who took, and I think everyone took MPAI 600, we saw a video about how ISIS has used the refugee rat lines to come into the United States, or to come into Europe as well. So the question is, first generation, second generation immigrants as potential threats, and please don't take that as a counter-immigrant, or nativist kind of viewpoint. So if there's questions or issues, please let me know, and I look forward to the discussion this week.